Welcome to the Staten Island Summer of Shorts Film Festival weekly networking group. So we got actors in the room, screenwriters, filmmakers, people that have been working in the industry for quite some time, and some new beginners that are just getting into it. So it's nice to have a nice balance tonight. And like I said, in the coming weeks, we're going to start bringing in special guests. Some of them have worked in front of the camera, and some have worked behind, and some have worked both. And how many of you guys are fans of a movie that's, oh gosh, I'm 40 years old now, called Back to the Future? Anybody like that movie?
Never heard of it.
Who hasn't seen it?
Nice, nice. Well, we have a special guest. His name is Jeffrey Weissman, uh, and he's going to be talking a little bit about his career, what he's been doing, and maybe he'll talk a little bit about Back to the Future and his part in that. Worked with Clint Eastwood, was on a show called Saved by the Bell. Did quite a lot of work for a working actor. So we're glad to have Jeffrey to jump on here and share a little bit about his career. So what I'll ask is if you guys have questions for him, throw them in the chat, and towards the end of the conversation, we'll ask a few of them before we run out of time. So.
And after 3 months of auditions and such, I finally got my first role um, in George Miller's segment of Twilight Zone movie, um, the remake of Nightmare at 30,000 Feet with John Lithgow. I know I have, as an acting coach, tried to expose my students to multiple techniques, at least exercises in the top 6 or 10 acting gurus' techniques. So everyone can get a taste of these different techniques to see if perhaps it works for them and they want to pursue it farther. In watching, I did Pale Rider with Clint Eastwood, and watching Clint work, he puts everything at the tip of his nose. It looks like he's not doing anything. But when it translates to the 70-foot screen, it's full and big. Watching Michael Keaton work, he's kind of a little bit bigger, but he has a formula that works really well for him. Like when I worked with Michael J. Fox on Back to the Future 2 and 3, his formula is what is so winning. Take after take, he's right on the mark. He's hits the comedy. It's like a muscle that he has honed over the years, doing his TV series and such. And in fact, I remember Mike Fox was the only actor I've ever seen call cut who wasn't directing already. He had this bit where he came into the camera on a long shot. He hit his mark and he said his line, and then he said, cut. I didn't even believe that myself. And I immediately looked at Bob Z, at Robert Zemeckis, who I was like, sure was going to be pissed off. And Bob kind of said, okay, all right, let's go, drew it again. Because Bob knew if Mike didn't believe it, it's not going to be believable.
Right. Now that's something interesting you're mentioning because you have this perspective of when you're watching films as even an actor yourself, you're picking up on these little things that maybe the general audience when they're watching a movie they might say, "Oh, well this person, they're a great actor. Oh, I like them. I'm attracted to them. They're good on camera." But if someone in this room is, "Hey, I'm considering acting as a real career," when they're watching movies, continue on to that. When they're watching like Michael J. Fox or even yourself or someone else that's an actor, what little details should they pick up on to really know if that person they're watching is really a good actor or not?
But it's kind of subjective. You're going to be looking for their continuity through their consistency, their depth, and their honesty. And you as an actor got to be on top of all those things. And it always upsets me when I see a multi-million-dollar picture or TV show that the cuts don't match. And a lot of the time you think a script supervisor whose job that is to stay on top of that is going to take care of it. And a lot of the time they're so trying to keep track of so many different things for wardrobe, for makeup, for effects, for editing, some blah blah blah, that they'll let things slip through the cracks. And a very conscious talent knows what's going around them all the time, is in tune with everything. That's why I mentioned the ensemble feel. Had that on Twilight Zone movie, had that on Pale Rider, and very fortunate to have it also on Back to the Future. Now the Back to the Future 2 and 3 originally was one film called Paradox. It was one script. And because the budget was just too big, too much, Universal almost pulled the plug on it. And the production team came back and said, you know, we've asked you for more money and you don't want to give us any more money, but we need more money. How about you give us $1 million and we'll deliver 2 pictures? And that's when it became part 2 and part 3, when it was no longer Paradox. And those who are Back to the Future fans that know, Michael J. Fox was shooting the first season of, I think it was the first season of Family Ties when they were shooting the first film. When we were shooting in part 2, he was doing the last season of Family Ties. Now, he was working Monday through Friday at Paramount on Family Ties last season during the day, and we had him at night and on the weekends. Mike, when do you sleep? And he said, in the limo in between the studios and in my dressing room when I'm not needed, or in the makeup chair. And I was, my God. And so, you know, we would work straight through these long hours. We have Mike, we got to work. So some of those scenes where you see in 2015 where Mike's playing Marlene, Marty Jr., and Marty Sr., I remember one of those weeks, I had a 19-hour, a 21-hour, and a 26-hour long day, and then a forced call, less than 8 hours before I had to be back in the makeup chair. The makeup always took 4 hours to get into any of those makeups. So everyone was exhausted, but also very excited and happy to be working and trying to work as a unit together to make sure that we were matching blocking and matching things for cut and levels of energy and so on and so forth. One of the really big, I guess, challenges on Back to the Future 2 was that they were working with a program that ran the dolly system for the very first time ever. A guy named Tondro had designed, and it was computer driven, which in 1988 was pretty damn new. And the camera, the Vista, was a Vista Vision, the VistaFlex, the Panaflex camera that you can see in this picture here, actually split the film inside of it. So Mike could play the 3 characters in the same shot. So if you can see in this photo, you got sitting at the table, Bobby Bennett, who is Michael's stand-in, and then Kevin Holloway, Michael's photo double, and then behind would have been Charlie Callahan, Michael's stunt double, while Mike's off getting made up into one of the makeups for whichever character they're going to shoot next. But we had to shoot each character separately, and you couldn't, once you set the blocking, you could not vary the blocking, because the camera was going to rewind that film and shoot that next section. So one actor can pass himself or herself the iced tea, whatever the blocking was. So it was technically incredibly challenging. And you may have heard stories that we had an earthquake, in fact, one night while it was locked down, and Zemeckis was scared to death that we were going to have to start from scratch after shooting all that stuff. Luckily, he cut around it, whatever messed up. And that was the beauty of watching Robert Zemeckis. He would have. I'm a huge fan of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I wanted to see if they were going to make a sequel. And Bob Z said, I don't know. And I was like, why? Because it was so challenging doing animation on with live action. He goes,
Mhm.
no, I've got more difficult shots to get and effects on this film than I had on Roger Rabbit. I was like, my
Wow.
God. So it was, and remember, this is 1988. There was no CGI.
Right.
We had, if you saw a flying car, they had to probably by hand erase the wires or the crane. You see my character hanging upside down. I'm wearing, in reality, white tennis shoes on a rail that started from the outside the front door that went through the living room and into the kitchen. There's a rail with wires, and I'm hanging upside down on wires that they erased. That's probably one of the reasons I'm not in that film that much, because it's expensive to hire them to erase those.
Great. So Dave's from Idaho, and he's asking, in Back to the Future, how was it to play a character that was already established in part one?
Yeah, it was odd. I wasn't told at first. Uh, they weren't on the up and up with me. They told me because that I was going to be a photo double, and I was friends with Crispin. I had done a film with him at the American Film Institute in '83 before he got the first film. I even called him and say, I could use the word, say a good word for me. And then when I was after my screen test and told that I would be George, that Crispin was out, I couldn't fathom how they were going to do it. But they hired me, and I saw in the trades then that Crispin was unavailable due to scheduling conflict with another film, which was not true. He was asking $1 million in script approval, which they weren't going to give him. But nonetheless, I ended up having to do the film and recreate his performance. And because, as I mentioned, I played these characters, Stan Laurel and Charlie Chaplin and such, I could study Crispin's moves and his center of gravity and his voice, and got it all together. So it looks pretty seamless. And his makeups were based on his life mask. And then after the film came out and I learned, and he called me and said, I never had an agreement for that makeup. And I was like, that's not fair. So I gave him my photos and stories, and he got his out of court settlement for three-quarters of a million. So it was a challenge, but it was dubious because they were trying to pull a fast one because they wouldn't come to terms with him, or he wouldn't with them. It was odd. But nonetheless, I think it looks pretty seamless. Those who are scrutinizing can, if they look real close, can see that the makeup doesn't quite match. Um, and there's a lot of urban legend and stuff out there. But it was an honor to work with such great people on such a wonderful story that's now one of the top 10 trilogies of all time.
Right,
With
right.
all your acting credits and all the actors you worked with, do you feel slighted a bit by being remembered as the other George McFly? Yeah, it's odd. It They're detractors, but I have this fan base from around the world, and a lot of people, I have a lot of those fans have been good friends, and those who know the real story and all the inner workings of that mess, are my advocates, which is really nice.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's really great. Now, I did mention at the beginning, 40 years of Back to the Future, and are you collaborating with any of your fellow cast members? Are you doing
Yeah,
anything?
I'm very close to many of the cast, and we did a reunion in January with Mike the week after he got the Medal of Freedom from the president. I remember Mike was just coming off his panel. He grabbed my hand. I was like, "Congratulations!" He grabbed my hand and said, "I feel like a kid. I feel like I'm 14. I want to go out in the parking lot and dance and drink a beer." I was like, "Oh, Mike." It was really lovely. We had I think we had about 10 of the cast. Huey Lewis even showed up at that one, and we're going to do another one in Canada I haven't been announced yet, but I should be there in Calgary at the end of April. So the 40-year cast reunions are happening, and I just agreed to do one in the south of France. I have a nice big following internationally, as I mentioned.
Very cool. Very
Yeah,
cool.
Stephanie has her hand up.
Yeah, feel free to unmute yourself and
Hi.
ask.
Hello. Thank you so much, Jeffrey, for being here. And thank you, Vinny, for hosting this. This has been awesome. Jeffrey, you mentioned something interesting when you did an audition that was an open casting call. And at that point, you had had some training and you were very confident. So, do you feel that one of the factors to succeeding as an actor is to have a certain amount of confidence and that will differentiate you and get you more gigs?
Yes, well, my confidence at that period came out of how in tune I felt. I was juggling 6 different scripts at that time. I was 3 of them were major productions at the university, and the other 3 were classwork. And I was firing on all pistons. So I had exactly what you said. I had this confidence because I felt, my naturalism, my realism was working. I could hit my marks, and it being raised in LA, seeing a cattle call, I kind of laughed at the whole scene, and I think they like that. I hear about the early days with Sean Penn auditioning, and he would envision that the casting director was sitting on a toilet, so he had power over them or something. And Sean comes from a Hollywood family. Leo Penn, his dad was a director, his mom was a Broadway actress, and he studied with Peggy Fury, who was a great acting coach. And I think that confidence, got the ball rolling. His brother Chris, who I worked with, also had this confidence and easygoing and simple technique and attack. So keep it simple, keep it confident, and take care of yourself.
Well, thanks everybody for joining, and special thanks to Jeffrey for joining us. We're going to be doing this every Thursday night. We'll be bringing in some guests. And Jeffrey, what's next for you? You going to come to Staten Island to the Summer of Shorts Film Festival one year? You'll have to make the trip.
That would be cool. I get to the East Coast as much as I can. I've got an auntie upstate New York, and cousins and other relatives all up and down the East Coast. And yeah, you guys, you can write me through jeffreyweissman.com if you want to drop me a note, or if you want to get the family member or friend that's a Back to the Future fan a signed picture. I got them there. Hey, it was really a treat to be here. I'm sorry we're out of time. I have many more stories if you want to have me back.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have to reschedule something in the future. So, thank you guys so much.